Hello again. This is 1990's Rasslin Strategy card game by Mike Besky, though you won't find his name on it anywhere, and only 2 mentions on the entire internet can even be found for the game, which both reference him, so I'm assuming he's the one to blame for this game. This is another one of those games I ordered while I was apparently sleepwalking or experiencing my own still unreleased Butterfly Effect movie, because I have no idea how I came about owning this thing. In most cases, these types of games were advertised in wrestling magazines like Pro Wrestling Illustrated, so I'll just assume that was the case for Rasslin Strategy, but I honestly don't remember any ads or buying it or how much I paid. Again, knowing me, it wasn't a lot. Besky apparently had a web presence as of June through April of 2004, but even though even the Internet Archive doesn't have one single viewable page of the actual official Rasslin Strategy page, it would appear the concept behind the game was not particularly popular, or perhaps something else happened to derail the Rasslin Strategy express train to Moneytown, but I'll get into that later. The first thing I notice upon once again opening the game is it has a huge stack of fairly large, thick cardstock cards. I'd estimate 6 to 8 ounces, if not more, just for the stack of cards. They make a satisfyingly large and solid thunk when dropped from even a meager height. Before I go on with the cards, though, I'd like to take a moment to address the next notable component of the game. Well, okay, the only other component of the game, the instructions. Yes, I was, let's say, underwhelmed. I got a giant stack of black and white cardstock cards and the rules, and that's it. I was really expecting something else. Maybe dice, but I'll get into that later too. Technically, the instructions are 4 pages long, but by pure math, it is only one actual piece of paper. A large piece, but still only one, folded and printed so as to make a 4-page booklet. Pretty cheap. But to be fair, a lot of these types of games have around the same amount of rules and attention given to their booklets. One of the most well-known, Tom Filsinger's Champions of the Galaxy, had a similar, though slightly longer rules book of just a few staple large sheaf pieces of paper. But it worked for Champions of the Galaxy because the rules were pretty clear and concise and covered all the bases, plus there were additional booklets that helped flesh things out further, and charts and other things like that. Then again, that game had the benefit of having been around quite a while and really had a chance to evolve, including the layout of the instructions. Rasslin Strategy rules, well, they are there. You have the preamble blurb, the introduction, numbered wrestling move cards, illegal moves, block, reverse, pin and submission, play of the game, 3 variations, extras, and don't stop here. All sections in these 4 pages. Now, either I didn't read the ad very well, which is possible since I was probably 14 to 16 years old when I bought this, or the ad only vaguely touched on its underlying mechanic, or it flat out avoided making any specific mention. But I will very clearly say that I was not pleased when I figured out what this part of the opening blurb in the instructions meant. You and your friends can enjoy hours of wrestling fun and excitement as you play out the moves the real wrestlers execute on TV. As someone who reads things with a much more discerning eye to detail and fine print now, I can see the red flag in this single sentence, but there is no way any teen could possibly have been expected to predict the literal meaning of this line if this was used in the ad copy. Although the last instruction page makes a vague hand wave saying, "You don't even have to be watching wrestling," the 3 variations given in this game actually require you and your friend, or friends if you live in magical rainbow unicorn land in the 1990s where you have half a dozen friends that all like wrestling, to actually be watching wrestling on TV, to play the game, because you play the cards that your wrestler executes in the televised match. That's how the game works. Can anyone else see a couple of problems creeping into this game's very basic concept and mechanic? Yeah, it isn't rocket surgery to spot the flaws pretty early on here. Scenario 1 is you watch a new televised match and play the game. Or maybe half a dozen matches if you get to see a whole full fight card on Primetime Wrestling or whatever wrestling you watched in the 90s. I don't know if anyone else remembers most wrestling in the 90s, but almost all televised wrestling consisted of squash matches, where monsters like The Undertaker or King Kong Bundy were put in the ring against Randy Johnson or Dale Green. Guess who got to perform the lion's share of the awesome moves in those matches? The answer is not Dale Green. So yeah, there might be 2 or 3, or you might have a few more than that, but 1 or 2 hour wrestling shows every week, and you might get to see 2 or 3 half-decent matches of any wrestlers anywhere in their superstar caliber. 3 if you held your mouth just right and said your prayers and took your vitamins. So you might get 3 usable Rasslin Strategy matches out of a single wrestling show where one of you weren't sitting there hoping to have a punch card, since that's all the jobber wrestlers ever managed to do before the headliners broke them in half or pounded them into quivering meat piles. So in this scenario, the game limits itself to, we'll be liberal and say, 3 plays a week, if you were lucky, of 3 matches a play. I suppose you wouldn't get tired of it that way, but I kind of like a game I can just pull off the shelf and say, let's play this. Not, well, tomorrow is Sunday, the night after that at 8 o'clock p.m., let's play. That doesn't work for me. I would really rather have a little immediate gratification. Maybe I'm spoiled. Scenario 2 discards the idea of relying on the TV, since you definitely still need to be watching the match since you've got to play the cards that the wrestlers use. But it's available only to those of us fortunate enough, or in some cases spoiled or well-to-do enough, to have their own VCR and wrestling tapes, either commercial ones or ones we recorded off TV. I had a little of both, mostly mine were recorded. While this would allow you to play the game about any time you wanted, the problem is, even if you, honest soul that you were, would never in a million years cheat or underhandedly forget all the details of a match until you were playing it, then remember, oh yeah, I guess I should keep this pile driver because I know that move happens in this match. Only if your friend were as big as a wrestling fan as you and also able to participate on this level of knowledge would this really be fair. So then he could also rely on this knowledge of specific matches to aid him during play. It's just ugly all the way around. It's just sloppy. And neither scenario is good. This brings me to the real problem of the game. The need to be watching a match at all. I don't know how it was for anyone else in the early toward the mid-90s, but while wrestling is pretty popular now, and it's cool, or at least not really uncool, to like wrestling, at least to some extent, when I was in school, as a teenage boy in northeastern Oklahoma, I might as well have been reading makeup and fashion magazines in class for all the ridicule and abuse it got me, even from the usually more circumspect students and classmates. The dirtwads and bullies, well, they seemed just that little bit more abusive in their treatment. Oh no, he's going to put me in a headlock. I always knew he was interested in my head. Ha ha ha. Oh, sexual innuendo, how clever. Sweaty men in their underwear rolling around hugging each other. No, I never heard that one before. That's hilarious. You're a comedy genius. Yeah, it never stopped. It really didn't. You cannot believe how ridiculed people that liked wrestling were. It was really looked down on. I didn't have a lot of friends for various reasons, but I had a handful, maybe 4 or so. How many were also wrestling fans? None. Now, I had some, most of them, that would play the occasional wrestling game with me. More so video games, but occasional dice or card or board game with me. Because at the heart of it, a game is a game. Competition and fun is what it is. Spending time with a friend is the same if you're still enjoying yourself and doing something that engages you. So I could usually get most friends to spend a bit of time indulging my wrestling fetish, and sometimes enjoy it, but they didn't watch wrestling themselves, so you can imagine how asking them if they wanted to watch wrestling would go over. Yeah, so I didn't do that. I had a neighbor who I'd also call a friend that was one of those chameleon types who could be a wrestling fan and could get excited about it and talk shop with you about it and watch it with you, but didn't do it on his own. Never have understood that, so I hesitated counting him even as a wrestling fan. This gave me a total of 0 friends who were wrestling fans, and my neighbor moved away right before I got Rasslin Strategy. Nice. Guess how many chances I got to play this card game that required you to watch wrestling on TV? If you guessed 3, then you pulled that number out of your butt, and I have no idea why. The correct answer was 0. This game went straight into my, interesting but not useful box that has followed me as I've moved throughout my life. I've looked more than once at that last line on the back page of the instructions that is almost otherwise totally empty and blank. At that, you don't even have to be watching wrestling to play, and wondered why they didn't follow that with a section on Variation 4, playing Rasslin Strategy without watching matches. And, had even the barest skeleton, even a simple rule set of how to play the game without having to be watching a match. Maybe something with dice to help introduce the extra drama. Had any of that been on there, I could have worked with it. I could have done it. I could have done something with it. But no, they gave nothing. Just, by the way, you can play this without watching wrestling. And that's all they said. They gave no examples how. They didn't provide anything. They just said you can. It's very much like Champions of the Galaxy's instructions on Battle Royals. They may have changed since I bought mine, but the original stuff I had said, decide on a method of how to choose whose turn it is. That's mighty handy. So because you obviously can't be bothered with the whole extra single page, in your instructions, you're telling me, make my own instructions. Thanks for the pro tip. Your product was well worth the money I paid for this ineffable wisdom. Alright, but let me get back to the actual rules that do exist before I lose complete track of where I'm at. The basic idea of how to play Rasslin Strategy is both players choose one of the wrestlers or tag teams in the live-action match. You watch the match. During the action, when your wrestler uses a move you have in your hand, you do various things depending on what variation you're playing. Either you discard moves, so you win by having no moves left in your hand, or the other variations, you want to get a run, so you play the move, and you want to eventually get a numerical sequence, like a 6, 7, 8, and 9. All the cards are numbered. And you also want a pin or submission card. Illegal moves can be used as jokers to complete a sequence. Blocks and reverse cards can be used probably in either variation. Though in the discard variation, if you play a card of a move that your wrestler performs, your opponent can play a card that's one number higher, and then you have to draw another card. Now, apparently you do that all at the same time while watching the match to see what other cards are being played. And can you imagine watching a match to see what to play and trying to keep your cards straight and draw and discard and what to play? And if your opponent has played a card and if you have something higher to make them draw a card, I know there can be slow spots in wrestling, but there can be frantic flurries of 4 or 5 actions too. Again, this just seems like a bad idea on so many levels. I just don't see how this was really seen as a solid idea for a game mechanic. I've seen other somewhat similar games use this concept, but they're implemented so much better, or the activation of points based on an event trigger is automated somehow or built into the system, or some other user-friendly aspect really raises these games above this. I suppose as a pioneer I could give this game some credit as a sort of prototype on an idea that's been improved on, though It could also be seen as a strange variation of a typical fantasy football idea where your chosen fantasy team gets points when the real team scores in a real game. I think that works well there because of the venue and format, but I just don't think this whole mechanic works for something like pro wrestling. It's just too involved. And while I can see that the point was to be simple and play basically as fast as a real match since you're watching the real match, chance and player choice often results in the game match not being decided when a match ends. A contingency for which the instructions say you should just carry the action to the next match. Yeah, but what if there is no next match? What if that's the main event, the last match on the card? Till next week. There's no answer for that unless you're watching a VCR tape, in which case it's fine. But if you're not, oh well. Or what if you held certain cards you knew were likely to be used by your chosen wrestler? And now your match is over, and you have all these cards, and the new wrestler that you choose is like King Kong Bundy, and all you got are like flying body press, and you're like, yeah, well, that's not going to happen. Yeah, I know it's just the vagaries of chance, and it could happen to the other player, but really it's just a sloppy answer and a sloppy game system overall. Now let me give credit where it's due. The cards are fairly well made for being simple black and white cardstock. The artwork is, compared to games of this sort, a bit above average. I'd really have to squint, but I could say it's even good. This, however, brings me back to the cards. Although they do appear to be inked by hand, in pen, or whatever, I still think some, maybe not all, for lack of a better word, were rotoscoped or traced from, like, famous wrestling match images. Either video footage or magazine pictures. If they were used as references by the artist, then I have to give even more credit because some of the resemblances to real wrestlers are so faithful as to be blatant. And that's really my last point here is I think that may be something else that contributed to the current absence of anything having to do with this game now. I don't know. I obviously I can't find anything on it, so I don't know if that's what happened. But I think it may have ran afoul of copyright or trademark or something having to do with wrestler likenesses. Because, I mean, let's look at this picture, this series of cards here. The upper left is a brainbuster. Now, it's debatable. It could be. It looks a little like Cowboy Bob Orton. It could be Terry Gordy. He actually had the brainbuster as his finisher. Could be other wrestlers. The second one, the DDT, is probably Dirty Dick Slater or possibly Dick Murdoch. Probably a Dick. It's probably a Dick using a DDT there. That's definitely that face. Something about that mouth. To the right of that is the Scorpion, and there's really only two wrestlers in contemporary modern times, and especially in the 90s, when the Scorpion was really becoming popular, Sting and Bret Hart. And it's hard to say, but that looks quite a bit like Bret Hart. Sting, he posed a little different. The way he applied the Scorpion was a little different, but that looks an awful lot like the way Bret Hart would stand. They've done a great job. If it's Bret Hart, they basically kept the hair and gave this guy a mustache and beard. You can't tell that's who it is, obviously, since I don't even know. But I would say that's a pretty good approximation. Now, down in the lower left, we see the guy on the right. If that's not Randy Savage, I don't know. I don't know who that is. That's Randy Savage. That is Randy Savage getting his hair pulled there, for sure. Now, the guy to his left, Sonny Bono, I I don't remember him wrestling, but it may have been one of those charity things, Sonny Bono. Now, it might be a Japanese wrestler, because the wrestlers would wrestle in Japan and stuff. That may be Great Muta or somebody, but I like to think it's Sonny Bono. Over to right of there, that sure looks like Jerry the King Lawler to me. That looks like Jerry the King Lawler. Applying that sleeper hold. Just something about that face. The artist did apparently too good a job on these faces. I'm just guessing, but I think something happened with copyright infringement and likenesses. It may not have happened, but I can see if it did, I would not be surprised. And to the right of that is Abdullah the Butcher with a chokehold on, again, I didn't remember this, but apparently on Burt Reynolds. I didn't remember any time that Burt Reynolds wrestled, but Abdullah the Butcher was an interesting choice. I got to give props to Burt. That's pretty brave. There's not a whole lot of wrestlers that got in the ring with Abdullah the Butcher, but for Burt Reynolds to do it. But he's a man's man, so I got to give him credit to get in the ring with Abdullah the Butcher. That's good on you, Burt. Proud of you. But in all seriousness, that's the kind of thing that you really have to avoid. Is you can use the poses for wrestlers, you can reference them, you can use the moves, the action scenes, the images. You have to change them a little bit, maybe make them more generic, change a few things around, change, like if a wrestler's wearing a singlet or something like that, you need to change it where he's wearing a full body thing or wearing only trunks, change their boots, change them from long to short hair. And, it could be argued and maybe you could legally be pursued if it's just so close to the same pose that lawyers could be like, here's the actual photograph this was taken from, here's the guy's artwork, it's obviously the same pose. But I really don't think that's illegal. I don't think you can just say the pose is copyrighted. I don't think you can do that if you're not doing the likeness of the wrestler. I think you can use people as references. So if they would have been a little more generic, that would have been a better idea. I think they're just a little too specific here. It looks good, the artwork looks good, but I think it was a mistake. But again, this was a lot of work that was put into this art. And the art's much better than the game. And I really think it's a shame that the art was done like this, because the art was wasted on these. There's like 35 cards. There's 50 cards, but a lot of them are duplicate. There's like 30 to 35 cards. Some are blocks and reverses and stuff. So there's like, I think, 3 of each move or something like that. But they were wasted on this game that barely had rules. But look at the artwork. It's great. Comparatively to other things like this. And it was put in this game. It's a shame that this was not put in something better that could have been used. I would like to be able to play a game where you can play a DDT and you've got a picture of a DDT on the card and you kind of, in your mind's eye, you can see that. And whenever somebody plays a scorpion on you, you're like, oh, yeah, scorpion. And it's a submission. It's got the little S in the corner, and it's well done. It's the ideas and the general concept of the cards there, the artwork, and the way it's laid out. I don't have any problem with it. It's great. It's just a shame it's on this piece of crap, honestly. That's the problem. Obviously, I didn't get bored with the game, but because I wasn't able to play it, but I wanted to so badly. I was like, look, it's got cards, it's got instructions, it's got, the cards have wrestling moves on it. It's a bunch of cards. They got wrestlers with art, and actually moves depicted and things like that. Somebody's taking the time to do this. This is such a shame I can't do anything with it. I colored in the numbers, not on all of them, but that's my coloring because it's just black and white cards. So, that's how much use I got out of this. I wasted time and just colored in numbers. So, thanks a lot for that. This provided me with, like, the crappiest coloring book experience ever. That's what this amounted to for me. Excellent. So, in conclusion, tabletop, fly or flop, or however you want to put this, I would definitely say this is a flop. Artwork's good. Past that, it's just bad all around. It's a bad idea, bad concept, bad everything, bad effort. There was really no effort put into this, and that's a shame. The moves themselves, the cards, they're centered pretty well, most of them. The flying head scissors is kind of off center and almost is cut off because it takes 2 lines. But other than that, these are done well. This has a lot of potential, and something like this could be done and could work. And I can see this as being quite possibly like a successor to things like the Champions of the Galaxy sort of originally looked like this. It was just black and white line art and things like that, and it's improved and has its own glossy hardcover book now. It's like a textbook, like a role-playing game book now. And I can see something like this being able to do that if the concept, the mechanic, and the system were at all usable, if they were at all valid or useful or playable, but they're not, and that's a real shame. So, this is a total miss, unfortunately, but I think it's important to look at these failures and never repeat them, but learn from them, and that's what I think we've done here. So, thanks for watching.